Hi, I'm Jackie Glover, a philosopher ethicist in the Department of Pediatrics and the Center for Bioethics and Humanities, here to describe the informed consent session that's part of your perioperative block. There are 3 faculty in this session: myself, Pat O'Rourke, who is Vice President for Legal Affairs at the university, and Fred Kuttner, a retired surgeon. Here are the objectives for our session: to be able to describe the informed consent process, the 8 elements, the ethical values, to describe the how a lack of informed consent case would be brought, argued, and won, the unique proxy decision maker process in Colorado, informed consent for minors, since some of you will be at Children's, and then because it's perioperative, the whole issue of DNARs in the ORs. So this is part of a developmentally appropriate handling of shared decision-making in informed consent. Back when you were in IPED, you got theoretically the vocabulary and the architecture for both the ethical and legal issues. But that was totally theoretical, hypothetical, with a hypothetical case. Now, these are your patients, but you're not getting informed consent. You're observing others on your team get informed consent. When you're 4th years and you know what you're going into, you'll meet with people in your specialty in preparation for the day in residency when they hand you the informed consent form and say, go get informed consent. So you'll learn about informed consent in the context of your specialty. There are a number of required readings for this session. There is, importantly, an overview video module by Pat O'Rourke. In plain English, he will describe the legal features of informed consent. There's 8 elements necessary. There's an oldie but goodie article from the 90s. I have not found anything better about the legal and ethical myths. And then there's an article saying, how do you do all these good things in the context of 13 minutes? There are the ASA guidelines for do not resuscitate orders in the OR. You have a copy of the assessing capacity tool that's available at the University of Colorado Hospital. And then you have 2 diagrams that clearly outline informed consent, who makes informed consent decisions for adults and for pediatrics. Be careful of the really small print. And so if you don't remember the IPED content, we have included the ethics basic concepts and vocabulary. So you have information about the values that we will need in the assignment. So what are you doing? You're doing a written assignment, which is really bullet points of a presentation. It's worth up to 10 points of your grade. You have to pass this element. So if you get below 6 out of 10, you have to rewrite. And the rewrite, if you do a perfect job, it counts for 8 points. So you read the required readings, you identify a patient story or a case of your own that has taught you something about informed consent. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a negative example. It could be a positive example. Like, I want to do informed consent just like this doctor. But use hypotheticals to demonstrate that you understand how a lack of informed consent case would be brought, argued, and won. There are 8 elements. You can describe and discuss any of the 8, but you have to be aware that the legal implications really focus on the 4th element of disclosure. The case presentation outline is due the Tuesday of the week. It's not a full paper. It's a bullet outline of a presentation. And please, it's a maximum of 4 pages. So there's also a required discussion the last Thursday of the course, and it's the afternoon before the next morning when your shelf exam. It's not ideal, but it's better than having the session the afternoon of your shelf exam. So you turn in your paper, and then you'll meet with the faculty in small groups and organically discuss what you have learned about informed consent. There will be a couple questions on your anesthesia exam. So what is this case presentation? So we have provided you with an outline. This is the outline. You have a sample case, and you have the rubric that Pat and I will use to grade it. So you describe your case scenario. You clearly identify the 8 elements, and remember the law focuses on element 4, disclosure, and then the ethical implications. This is step 4 in the 8-step process from IPED. You don't have to do, please don't do a full 8 steps, but we want you to be able to identify the stakeholders and identify the values of each stakeholder. And there are multiple values for each stakeholder, and then describe where they overlap and where they are in tension. And so the legal implications, you need to describe whether your team put themselves at legal risk. And you can use hypotheticals, remember. And remember, the law focuses on disclosure, element 4. So you need to demonstrate that you understand how a lack of informed consent would be brought, argued, and won. And use the elements of a tort: duty, breach, damages, and causation. And it's different than the good old-fashioned malpractice. A lack of informed consent case has unique disclosure requirements and unique causation. So the duty is for the professional to disclose what a reasonable physician would have disclosed. Be sure you define what the reasonable physician is. A physician of same or similar training and experience in a similar circumstance. That's the person that would come and testify that, in fact, you did not breach your obligation, your duty to disclose. And the unique causation is really unique. You have, the patient has to show that, doctor, you didn't tell me something that you should have. You breached your duty of disclosure. And if you would have disclosed that, I would have not consented, and thereby I would have avoided the harm. This is very hard to show. And I have an example from NPR. A patient ended up with a heart transplant who went in for a valve replacement. And the surgeon put in an experimental valve, and the patient was able to show the jury that, yeah, I would have liked to know that this valve was experimental. And if you would have told me that, I would have opted for the good old-fashioned tried and true valve. And that is an instance where the jury understood that, yeah, and they had testimony that reasonable physicians would testify, that would disclose that it was experimental. I don't think it helps the surgeon's case that he had stock in the company that made the valve, but I don't know really how that played out in the actual legal circumstances. So be sure you talk about duty, breach, damages, and causation, defining reasonable physician, and also describing the unique causation. And include some references to the medical literature and also to the course materials. So you will have a sample case. I don't need to tell you, please don't cut and paste from the sample. You'll also have the rubric that Pat and I will use to do your assessment. There is, you'll see in the assessment that participation in discussion is worth part of your grade. If you have any questions at all, please, this is my email address and my contact information. And I cannot, because I can't guarantee that I can read all of your drafts, I can't read any of your drafts. I'm sorry. But if you have questions or concerns, just shoot me an email. Good luck on your presentation. We look forward to discussing your cases. So